Hello YouTube. Today I want to go back to cosmonauts and UFOs and a little bit more about general space exploration as they viewed it, the cosmonauts. I want to speak about the one particularly whose name was Leonid Kadenyuk, who was the first cosmonaut of independent Ukraine. He flew on NASA's Space Station Columbia in 1997 as part of the international mission STS-87. Kadenyuk held the rank of Major General in the Ukrainian Air Force. Kadenyuk was also a member of the Ukrainian Parliament. He passed away in 2018 at the age of 67. Leonid Kadenyuk revealed interesting information about UFOs and the Soviet space program. He was interviewed by a number of Ukrainian and Russian newspapers. He also visited schools, universities, and of course he was asked questions pertaining to his cosmonaut years. One of the questions, of course, was whether he ever contacted UFOs. And he said the following: "I get this question a lot. Unfortunately, I did not see them. I saw satellites. One of them was flying near our ship. I'm more skeptical about UFOs. But if there are so many witnesses who say that there is a UFO, you cannot not believe it. Somewhere in the 1980s, when there was a UFO boom in the USSR, I flew a lot of fighter jets. And then came orders from Moscow that pilots who fly in the air and sight UFOs, they must not make contact, must not approach. But I've never met a UFO, unfortunately. Looking at how they fly and knowing the aerodynamics and technology that is created by human hands, I come to the conclusion that the principles of building UFOs are established on the use of gravitational forces. The technology used for people to fly into space has already exhausted itself. It will not fly far. Now we need to create something new, especially engines. Now we need to learn how to use forces and sources of energy in the universe. These are gravitational forces and electromagnetic forces. If we learn to use them, we will not be afraid of distances of the universe. But despite this, I would not categorically deny that extraterrestrial civilizations exist. Back in the Soviet times, when we were being trained, there was such an injunction for all cosmonauts: if you see any unidentified flying objects, in no case are you to approach it, and you are not to make contact. He also talked about future of humanity in outer space. And he said that there are many problems on Earth, and one of the problems is energy. Oil and gas reserves are being depleted. There are large reserves of helium isotope on the moon that will solve our energy problem. Then he talked about cosmonauts as a profession and so forth, and he said very interesting things. The very first cosmonauts were selected from fighter pilots. Sergei Korolev said that the cosmonaut should be the closest to it. And Sergei Korolev was the father of the Soviet space program. Kadenyuk said that there is a lot of overload, stressful situations. Now people of different professions fly into space: biologists, doctors, physicists. But our preparation, Soviet cosmonauts, he means, was unique. We were trained as test pilots, studied biology, astrophysics, and other disciplines. Despite the fact that I had a strong training, still did not have enough knowledge to understand some aspects in space. And he was also asked about whether everyday people could soon fly into outer space. And he said, I don't think it's going to be soon. It's not possible now. A person who flies into space must be physically prepared for this. Overload, weightlessness for a person whose state of health does not allow withstanding these factors. Flights are only going to be for those who can do it, who can withstand overload and weightlessness. But now there are space tourists. However, flights are very expensive. But despite this, they're still trained, go through selection, so no one just simply flies into the space. Because just because you paid the money doesn't mean that someone's going to have to handle the overloads, or could do it. And as far, he was asked about the space flight to Mars. He said, before making such flights, it is necessary to protect the person from impact of space, in particular from cosmic radiation. After all, you cannot send people out there so they just heroically die. And whatever they say, we do not know how to build settlements on other planets. And what people will do there, personally, I do not understand. The development of our technology is not yet at the level that we can implement such a project. In addition, it is one thing to fly in the orbit of the Earth, but quite another to be very far away and see millions of kilometers of only emptiness or void around oneself. We do not know how the human psyche will react to this. And if we talk about a one-way flight, as for me, a normal person will not agree to this. I wouldn't fly like that. But to the question, would you fly back and forth? Kadenyuk answered confidently and without hesitation, yes. He was asked what is it like to be in outer space. And the Ukrainian cosmonaut said, the situation in space is stressful. And in general, spaceflight is a complete stress. But a person should not constantly feel stress. One German scientist said that stress is not what you endured, but how you did it. In space, the feeling of danger, that you are far from the Earth, the space itself and the ship is separated by a wall of only 3 millimeters. And of course, it puts an imprint on the psyche. But don't think about it. It is a little different, like in Parliament. Spaceflight helped me understand that human society is not living properly, and the laws that are created in parliaments do not always meet human morality. So we have some problems. He also talked more about Mars, and he recalled that there was a song in the Soviet Union that one day apple trees will bloom on Mars. And he said, in fact, this cannot be, because physical conditions do not allow there to exist life as on Earth. When I was in space, I had the idea that civilization was different. When you look at the Earth, you immediately realize that our planet is alive. It has a blue color. It is unique in the universe. When I look at the Earth, I had negative feelings, in particular the thickness of the atmosphere that envelops the Earth. This thin layer of atmosphere plunged me into despondency. The question arose whether in such a thin layer of atmosphere life can exist on planet Earth. When you fly around the Earth, it is more than 80% covered by the oceans. And I remember that submarines navigate into oceans. There was a thought about the nonsense of spending trillions of dollars on the production of weapons which is directed against life. That is, looking from there, you understand how much military activity is incompatible with life on Earth. All this is perceived very negatively. He was asked what danger are awaiting the cosmonauts millions of kilometers from Earth. Is it creepy to realize that you're in space, that there are no living souls near you for thousands of kilometers? And he said, now people are flying around the Earth in near space in orbit. Man has not yet flown far beyond the Earth. But when I flew in outer space and looked into the universe in depth, the perception of the universe, the very space itself, its essence is different from what we feel on Earth. In space, when there is a void of millions of kilometers around, there is this space, it's perceived differently. It is not clear how the human psyche can understand this multi-kilometer void. It's a lot of stress. I believe that this is a problem that can be compared to the problem before the first flight into space. Then there was a question of how a person would endure weightlessness. I believe, having been in space flight, I have become convinced of the flexibility of the human body. The whole flight I perceived as an experiment on myself, as a biological being. But I think a person is capable of taking the test. A person has a brain that is very complex and flexible. He or she can recycle everything. I think that a person will be able to endure long flights and the test by this multi-kilometer void. And what is a long flight? The longest flight was about 400 days. The orbital flight itself specifically affects the body. For example, on Earth, in the body, there are about 200 processes. And in space, there is no gravity, and it begins to mess with these processes. And a person has changes that he perceives negatively. It is hard to describe them, but then the body gets used to it. Getting into a state of weightlessness occurs when the engine of the ship is turned off. I had a process of adaptation within 24 hours, and after 2 days, I have fully adapted to this state. And the very standing of weightlessness can be compared with a porous substance that's dipped in the water. How many times did you fly, and how does the space flight affect one's health? And Kadenyuk said, I flew once into space. The feeling of weightlessness is a feeling of unique lightness. Before the flight, I had a thrill as I would endure weightlessness. I was familiar with the overloads, so I was not afraid of them. On Earth, it is not possible to stimulate a state of weightlessness for a long time. There are special airplanes, but there is only this state that lasts 20 seconds. The flight affects the health. What happens to the body in a state of weightlessness, especially in the first 2 days of adaptation? But it's not so much serious as to lose your ability to work. After I went through the adaptation process, I had the feeling that I knew this condition. I began to analyze and admitted that before birth, a person is in the womb in a similar state. Maybe once upon a time, people came to Earth from outer space, and at the gene level recorded this state. This is one of the fantastic explanations. There has to be an adaptation to space. When we are on Earth under the influence of gravity, there is more blood in the lower part of the body. And in a state of weightlessness, blood is evenly distributed throughout the body. That is, more blood enters the brain. Even my face became redder, veins swollen. That's after learning the transition from weightlessness to gravitation can be dangerous after the landing. And a person can even lose consciousness. So this was the cosmonaut of Ukraine. I'm very proud of it. I'm also from Ukraine. And I'll bring you more tales of the cosmonauts and their experience in outer space, and also sightings of what we call UFOs and a reaction to it. It's very interesting. I have a few videos now, this one, and I'll continue because there has been so much with the Soviet space program, and then after the Soviet Union disintegrated, we had the Russian and Ukrainian space programs and cosmonauts out in the space. I want you to compare it to what's going on with the American, of course, Chinese programs. It's all very interesting. And please, if you can, support my research. There is a link in the description section to the Patreon account. And we'll speak again soon. Thank you.